Hello, welcome to another one of Mr. Deeping's science lessons. For today's session you're going to need a book, a pen and worksheets which you can download in the link below. In your books I'd like to get down today's title, which is Photosynthesis, and for your starter activity I would like to answer the questions: what do plants need for photosynthesis, and why are leaves green? I'm going to put 5 seconds on the clock, and if you need more time, pause the video, and when you're finished we'll go through the answers together. Did you get an answer? Let's start with why these leaves are green. When we did the structure of the cell, in the plant cells there was a green organelle called the chloroplast, and we said the chloroplast was the site of photosynthesis. It is these chloroplasts that make the leaves green. Did you make any suggestions as to what plants might need for photosynthesis? If you did, you can check them off as we go through today's lesson. Because in today's lesson we are going to recall the equation for photosynthesis, and we're going to explain how it can be identified as an endothermic reaction. We're also going to explain how a leaf is adapted for photosynthesis, and we're going to describe some simple experiments to show photosynthesis being carried out and to show that starch is being stored within the leaf. So what do plants need for photosynthesis? Well, they need something from the atmosphere. They need carbon dioxide. They also need to absorb something from the soil, which would be the water. This then gives the plant a useful product. This useful product is glucose. And it also produces a waste product, which is oxygen. And this reaction is an endothermic reaction. This means that it requires energy from the surroundings. But where does this plant get this energy from? What do we know that plants need which is not in this equation? The energy that's being absorbed by the plant is the energy from the light. So our equation is carbon dioxide plus water gives us glucose and oxygen. But this reaction doesn't happen if there isn't any light. With that in mind, I'd like to answer these 4 questions. I want to know, where do plants get their carbon dioxide and water? I want you to give the word equation for photosynthesis. I want you to suggest some evidence that photosynthesis is an endothermic reaction. And I would also like to suggest how plants get their energy at night. And if you really want a challenge, I'd also like to suggest how a leaf is adapted for photosynthesis. I'm going to put 5 seconds on the clock, and if you need more time, pause the video, and when you're finished, we'll go through the answers together. Have you got some answers? Let's start with this top one. Where do plants get their carbon dioxide and water from? The carbon dioxide is absorbed from the atmosphere and the water is absorbed from the soil. The word equation for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide plus water gives glucose and oxygen. Some suggestions as to evidence that photosynthesis is an endothermic reaction. Photosynthesis does not occur at night or in the absence of light at all because it requires energy from the sunlight. Suggesting then how plants get their energy at night, they do a different process called respiration. They've spent all day creating that glucose. They can then metabolize that glucose to release energy. And plants actually do this respiration all day. So photosynthesis only occurs when there's light available, but respiration occurs all the time. Did you make any suggestions as to how a leaf is adapted for photosynthesis? If you did, you can check them off when we do the next part of our lesson. So now we can recall the equation for photosynthesis and explain how it can be identified as an endothermic reaction. So let's talk about how leaves are adapted for photosynthesis. In the starter we asked, why is the leaf green? This is because they contain chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are the site of photosynthesis. And if we look at the shape of this leaf, it is not something that has a small surface area. It has a large surface area, so it can absorb more sunlight. And if you think about how thick a leaf is, they are incredibly thin. This increases the rate of diffusion for the gases involved in the photosynthesis reaction. So the carbon dioxide coming in and the oxygen going out. So how does the water get absorbed by the roots and end up in the leaf? It is transported up the stem and to the leaf in structures called xylem. It also contains structures which transport the glucose away from the leaf called phloem. If we look at a microscope cross-section of a leaf, we can see little holes in the bottom. These little holes are called stomata, and they open and close to allow gases to enter the leaf and leave the leaf. Also in this cross section, we can see air spaces between the cells of the leaf. These air spaces allow carbon dioxide to get to the cells for photosynthesis. It also allows more surface area of the cells to be exposed to increase the rate of diffusion. So with that in mind, our next task is going to use the worksheet, which you can download below. If you haven't got a worksheet, don't worry about it. In each one of these questions, I would like you to explain which of these leaves is better for photosynthesis. Now this is an explain question, which means you need to give your answer and the reason why. On the worksheet there are 5 of these. We're going to do the first 3 and then we'll come back and we'll do the last 2. I'm going to put 5 seconds on the clock, and if you need more time, pause the video, and when you're finished, we'll go through the answers together. So which of our leaves are better for photosynthesis? In question 1, leaf B is better because it has a larger surface area so it can absorb more sunlight. In question 2, it's also leaf B. Leaf B is greener, which means it contains more chloroplasts, which are the site of photosynthesis. In question 3, we are looking at the microscope cross-section and we can see that leaf A contains more air spaces for gas diffusion. Now I did say that there were 5 questions, so we've got 2 more sets we need to analyse. I'm going to put another 5 seconds on the clock, and if you need more time, pause the video, and when you're finished, we'll go through the answers together. So looking at set of leaves number 4, leaf B contains more stomata for gas exchange. You can see there's only 1 hole in the bottom of this leaf, there's 2 holes in the bottom of that leaf. And for our last set of leaves, it's going to be leaf B. Leaf B is thinner, this means it's going to increase the rate of diffusion of those gases. So now we can explain how a leaf is adapted for photosynthesis. For our next task, I have a diagram of an experiment which is set up to measure the rate of photosynthesis. What I want you to do is to look at how this apparatus is set up and answer the questions. Number 1, how do you know the pondweed is photosynthesizing? And number 2, for this experiment, I would like you to identify the independent variable, the dependent variable, and the control variables. If you want a copy of this diagram, then it's the second worksheet in the link below. I'm going to put 5 seconds on the clock, and if you need more time, pause the video, and when you're finished, we'll go through the answers together. So how do you know that this pondweed is photosynthesizing? It is because our pondweed is producing these bubbles of gas. This gas is oxygen, the waste product of photosynthesis. Our independent variable for this experiment is the light intensity. We had a ruler and a light source, and we would move the light source closer to the pondweed or further away from the pondweed and record how it affects the rate of photosynthesis. The dependent variable for this investigation could be one of 2 things. You could either count the amount of bubbles which are produced in a certain amount of time, or if you put markings on your test tube to show how much gas is formed, then you could measure the volume of the oxygen produced over a period of time. Things that we would need to keep the same would be the temperature, because this is a reaction which is governed by enzymes, and we'll look at that more next lesson. Making sure that our plant has plenty of water available, because we need water for photosynthesis. Making sure the concentration of carbon dioxide dissolved into this water is the same, because if we increase the concentration of our reactants, then the rate of reaction would be quicker. You could also control the light source, make sure you are always using the same one. Now if you think back to the digestive system topic, we know that large molecules of starch are broken down into smaller molecules of sugar so that they can be absorbed into the bloodstream. Plants do the opposite. Because they're making glucose all day, which is a sugar, they're going to attach those sugar molecules together to make molecules of starch. And we can prove that there is starch in the leaf by using the same food test we use to detect starch, by adding iodine. And if it turns a blue-black colour, then the starch is present. And if there's no colour change, if it remains orange, then there's no starch present. For our next task, we're going to add iodine to 2 leaves of the same plant which were picked at different times. A leaf from this plant was picked in the afternoon, and when we tested it with iodine, it turned this colour. A leaf from the same plant was picked in the morning, and when we added iodine, it didn't change colour. It remained orange. So if both of these leaves were taken from the same plant, I would like you to try and explain the difference between these two results. And if you want a hint, you might have to think back to how plants get their energy at night time. I'm going to put 5 seconds on the clock, and if you need more time, pause the video, and when you're finished, we'll go through the answers together. Have you written your answer? Let's have a look. This leaf that was picked in the afternoon and had this dark blue-black colour, this blue-black colour indicates that starch is present. The plant has been in the sunlight all day, which means it's been photosynthesizing. This photosynthesis produces glucose, and that glucose is stored as starch molecules. This is why we've got a positive result for starch. The leaf that was picked in the morning that didn't change colour shows that there is no starch present. This is because the plant has been without sunlight all night, which means it hasn't been photosynthesizing. So where has all that starch gone? The plant has used the starch for respiration and has none left, so you don't get any colour change. So now we can describe a simple experiment to show photosynthesis being carried out using the pondweed and counting the bubbles, and we can also show that starch is present in the leaves by using iodine, which turns blue-black when starch is present. Which means we've got one more thing to do before we wrap this lesson up, and you get to choose what to do. You can either write a paragraph summarising today's lesson using as many keywords as possible, or you can have a go at task B, which says that algae photosynthesize, but they do not absorb the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Your task is to suggest where they get their carbon dioxide from. And that will wrap up everything that we need to do for our introduction into photosynthesis. I hope you had a great lesson, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching the lesson. If you found it useful, don't forget to press the like button, and why don't you subscribe and press the bell icon as well so you know when the next lesson's available. You can also support me on Patreon, and you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and I appreciate all the support. And I'll see you next time.